Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm Fuzz Martin. I'm the president of the board of directors for Kewaskum Remembers 9/11 Inc. That's the nonprofit organization responsible for the operation and maintenance of the Wisconsin 9/11 Memorial and Education Center. I'm also the village president here in Kewaskum, and on behalf of the 9/11 Memorial's board of directors and the village of Kewaskum, I want to say thank you for coming and attending here today as we come together to remember those who were killed on September 11th, 2001, those heroes who emerged in the aftermath of the tragedy and the resilience of our nation. I would like to extend a special welcome to the Haberman family, to the Freund-Henneberry family, our keynote speakers, Ronaldo Vega and Mike Kenny, and all the veterans and first responders in attendance. Thank you for your continued service and dedication. I'd also like to give a special thank you to our teachers and students in attendance today. This memorial was built for you to help teach future generations. And lastly, I would like to thank our elected officials in attendance. Thank you for supporting 9/11 education in our schools and understanding the importance of spreading the lessons learned on September 11th and in the days and years following the attacks. Today marks our fourth remembrance event since opening the Wisconsin 9/11 Memorial. And we're not here to only remember the events of the fateful day, but to ensure that the stories of heroism, sacrifice, and resilience are never forgotten. We are reminded how a single day changed the course of a nation, and we honor the lives that were selfishly taken from us. This memorial is beautiful, yes, and we are all quite proud to have it here in our community, right here in Kewaskum. It stands as a beacon of remembrance and education, but it's also something that none of us should ever take for granted. Every time you see that 2,000-pound piece of steel, you should remember that just 23 years ago today, that very piece of steel was supporting one of the world's most iconic buildings, filled with thousands and thousands of innocent lives, people just like you and me, who are simply going about their day. 23 years ago today, that building fell around that piece of steel. And then 9 years ago, that piece of steel came to Kewaskum, and now it stands here proudly, pointing back directly at its home at Ground Zero, and it will stand here for generations, telling its story for all who see it. So now as we prepare to reflect and remember, I invite all who are able to stand to please do so, as Joel Lewin offers our invocation.
Thank you, Fuzz. Good afternoon. As we gather today in front of this significant monument, we reflect on a day profoundly impacted in our history. September 11th, 2001 is a date etched in our memories, a moment that shaped our nation and lives. On this anniversary, let us honor not only the lives lost in the tragic events, but also the bravery of those who rushed into danger to help others. The first responders, firefighters, and police officers who selflessly dedicated themselves to saving lives exemplified the spirit of courage and compassion that defines us. This monument serves as a testament to the resilience of the United States, reminding future generations of the sacrifices made by our servicemen and women who confront danger daily to protect our freedoms and well-beings. I invite you now to bow your heads for a moment of silence to honor those who lost their lives that day and remember the families still affected by their loss. God of peace and mercy, we come before you on this solemn anniversary, lifting up the souls lost on September 11th. Embrace them in your love and comfort, their families and friends. Help us to mourn with compassion and look to the first responders as examples of bravery and selflessness. May we also remember the kindness shown to those who opened their homes to others in need that day, inspiring us to be more welcoming. As we confront darkness, may we remain steadfast in seeking your eternal light. Amen.
Thank you. And now, I'd like to introduce Gordon Haberman and Julie Haberman-Osmus, the father and sister of Andrea Lynn Haberman, to introduce our keynote speakers. And you may all be seated.
Please. Thank you for coming here. As to this year's memorial service in observance of the attacks on our country which occurred on 9/11/2001. Your presence here, 23 years after the attacks, is proof that the words "never forget" ring true.
Sadly, those attacks claimed the life of our beloved daughter and sister, Andrea. She was on the 92nd floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center when the building collapsed. Words and pictures cannot describe the utter devastation that we witnessed as we stood on what became known as Ground Zero. There were hundreds of workers toiling in the horrendous conditions involved in the recovery and rescue of those missing. They were searching for victims, all of them, including our Andrea.
It became important to us that we meet some of these courageous workers. On Ground Zero, we were able to meet with the General Superintendent of the recovery operation to see if we could meet some of these men and women. And a tradition began with our family and continued for 18 years of gathering at a restaurant in the shadows of the missing towers on the evening of every 9/11 anniversary. This group grew to include New York Fire Department, New York Police Department members, engineers, survivors, volunteers, tradesmen, rescue personnel, and members of our country's armed forces. All had responded and toiled in the wreckage of the trade centers. These annual gatherings became a time for all of us to decompress on each other's and catch up on each other's lives. For our family, these people have become our New York family, and we have forged friendships built on our shared connection to the horrendous attacks of 9/11, which will last our lifetime.
It was early in our gatherings that we met our first guest speaker for today, Mr. Ronaldo Vega and Mr. Mike Kenny, who are employees of New York City's Department of Design and Construction. Ronald Vega served on the 9/11 Disaster Rescue and Recovery Team at Ground Zero from September 2001 to July 2002. An architect with over 40 years of experience, he later served as the Senior Director of Design for the National 9/11 Museum and Memorial. He helped to save and nurture the survivor tree, which has been replanted at the National 9/11 Memorial in New York. He has contributed significantly in various memorials, including the Wisconsin 9/11 Memorial.
Mike Kenny served on the 9/11 Disaster and Rescue Team at Ground Zero from September 2001 to April 2002. As project executive for the New York City Department of Design and Construction, he played a key role in recovery programs after Superstorm Sandy, helping to restore 150,000 homes. Mike Kenny has also testified before Congress advocating for health care for the Ground Zero workers who toiled at Ground Zero for 9 months until the site was cleared. Sadly, another DDC member of our group, Mr. Charles Kazarowski, succumbed to cancers and diseases caused by his exposure to the toxins at Ground Zero. He attended our meetings until it became physically impossible to do so.
Mike and Ron have been supporters of the Wisconsin 9/11 Memorial and Education Center since its inception. We remember well meeting with Ron in New York, going over the blueprints of the Kewaskum Memorial well before construction started. After a lengthy application process, our Wisconsin Memorial was awarded a clone of the survivor pear tree Ron had rescued from Ground Zero by the National 9/11 Museum in New York. My dad was going to drive to New York to pick it up. However, he was informed that because of the COVID restrictions, he would need to be quarantined for 2 weeks in the city. With help, Ron and Mike said, "Don't worry, we got it," and they drove it here to the Wisconsin 9/11 Memorial and Education Center.
Please welcome my dear friends, Ronaldo Vega and Mike Kenny, as they will speak about their experiences at Ground Zero and beyond.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm a keynote speaker here today. I'm not worthy. 9/11 is a solemn day. It took place 23 years ago, but for many of us, it's like yesterday. Today's the first time since the attacks on 9/11 that I'm not in New York City. And only the call of a native Wisconsin son could make me be here today. It was an honor and a privilege to be a responder to the attacks on 9/11/01, especially since I didn't have to. I had no responsibility or requirement to do so. You see, not all responders wear uniforms. God bless the NYPD and the FDNY. I'm not worthy to touch their feet. I'm just an average city worker who felt compelled to help. I didn't lose anyone on 9/11, but at the same time, I felt like I lost every one of them. With that sense of obligation, Mike and I went there without hesitation, despite the horrors or the conditions that we would face. Months upon months of grueling and mental and physical labor was only cushioned by rare moments of kindness and humanity. Michael Patrick Kenny, who I only met at Ground Zero, is now my brother for life. And Kathy and Gordon Haberman, who I met on a cold morning in 2002 on Ground Zero, are now my closest family. I'm here because Andrea Lynn Haberman lived. I'm here because her family are from Wisconsin, and they're the first people I ever met from Wisconsin. And now I can't help but think of people of Wisconsin as being the heart of this country, of being such noble people, and their thought to make this memorial to people who died in New York. Yes, people from Wisconsin died there too, but keep in mind, when we first reported to site, we thought over 50,000 people had died. Thank God, much less than that. But they were from all over the country and from all over the world. And when Mike and I were working that site, we tried not to get personal because it was just too hard to work that site and get personal. But when we met Gordy and Kathy, it changed for us. From that moment on, we knew we were fighting for, and it's hard to say this, but we were fighting for proof of death. That's important. By the time Mike and I got there, proof of life was kind of like only a hope. No one else after the first day would leave that site alive. So we spent the next months after months trying for proof of death to give some level of comfort to the families who had lost their loved ones. And we did pretty good. We didn't do all we could. We feel like failures because we couldn't find everybody. But we did the best we could. So when I was told about this memorial, and I was told if there was anything I could do to help. You know, the last living thing to leave Ground Zero was our survivor tree. It was burned, it was destroyed. The Parks Department called it mortally wounded. They had given up on it, but we at DDC did not give up on it. We made sure that she was taken from the site in the dark of night because, quite frankly, we couldn't admit to anyone that we cared about a tree more than we cared about their loved ones. So we got that tree put on a flatbed and we took it up to the Bronx, and we kind of let it sit there for a while, and we went back to our hard labor. Years later, I became the director of design for the 9/11 Memorial Museum. I remembered that tree. I said, I wonder what happened to that tree. Pretty much like someone who finds someone hurt on the highway, you put them on an ambulance, you've done your job, right? You don't really follow up on what happened to them. So I was kind of busy. I didn't follow up on what happened to that tree. People had left the city. People who knew about the tree had retired. People had gone out of state. Nobody knew where that tree was. And we found that tree in that nursery in the Bronx. And when I saw her, she was the ugliest damn thing I've ever seen in my life. And I fell in love with her. So we fought to bring her back, and we got her back. And we made her repatriated to her home on Ground Zero. So her being the last living thing to leave Ground Zero and the first thing being planted back at Ground Zero, it was only fitting that her children, her two offspring, would come here to sit on your memorial. So you have the living legacy of the Survivor Tree of New York as part of your memorial. And I think that's kind of the only thing I can do. It's the best thing I can do for you. And seeing her here, seeing the two children here, one here at the front, the other one, and kind of giving a nod to that piece of steel that we toiled 10 months around, and now she's here pointing back to New York. I feel like this is a piece of New York here as well. Wisconsin and New York united in our futures and our hopes to go forward. So Gordy has asked me to do something that I do every 9/11, and I thought I was going to hold it pretty good until he mentioned our brother Charlie Kay, who passed away. So it's with a heavy heart, but I offer this up to you in his memory, in memory of all those that died on that horrible day, and I have to say that were murdered on that horrible day, and all of those that have died since and are still suffering with the consequences of that day. For those that have gone ahead and those that are still with us and suffering, I offer this for them. Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the flowers are dying. 'Tis you must go and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's on the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow. 'Tis I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Ah, Danny boy, I love you so. And when you come, if all the flowers are dying, if I am dead, as dead I well may be, you'll come and find the place where I am lying, and kneel and say an Ave there for me. And I shall hear, though soft, you tread above me, and all my grave shall sweeter, warmer be. for you will bend and tell me that you love me, and I shall lie in peace until you come to me.
Thank you, Ron. And now, Mike Kenny.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Kenny, and I don't know how to follow that up. That leaves me way down on the bottom here, but I'll try to let you know. On September 11, 2001, I was working for the city of New York for 15 years already, and what happened was unbelievable for anybody in the city at that time. And I was on Rikers Island, and I went into, we were loading Scott packs and sending them down to the site for the fire department because they had lost so much equipment when the towers came down. And I didn't get home until like late the next morning, and the TV antenna was down, but you could get a picture and you could listen on the radio, and that's how I spent the next 2 days, looking at the TV, figuring it out, because we were locked out of the city, couldn't get back to the city. So when I finally got back to the city that Friday, they told me that I was detailed down to the site, and I was to report on Saturday night. And I remember going home and told my wife that I was going to be down at the site, and she was like, "What are you going to do down there?" And I said, "I don't know, but we're going down there, and I'll figure it out." And you got to remember, this is back when you had a beeper. That was about it. You know, no cell phone, no cameras. It was just amazing. So that first night, it was like something out of a 1950s movie. You know, we were taking out the bucket brigade, the volunteers, and we were bringing in the tradespeople. And they were shaping up at Jacob Javits, which is 23rd Street, you know, about a mile away from the site. And I finally got down to that site Sunday morning around 4 in the morning, and I had worked in the trade towers. I had worked across the street in the financial center, and I thought I knew it, but I didn't know where I was. I was on another planet, looking at such destruction that I couldn't even comprehend what was going on. Lost all my bearings, and we ended up staying down there like for 72 hours straight through, and that Monday morning, I went back to Rikers Island, and then that Monday night, I went back down to Ground Zero, and, you know, my wife didn't see me for a week, you know, and cell phones, towers were down, trying to communicate was hard, and she didn't know what was going on, and I really didn't know what was going on. But I ended up spending 7 months at the site. And what I would like to relay to these people here is, to the young people, my daughter was just turning 13th on September 13th, and my son was just going to first grade. And I walked out of that house. My wife became, you know, a single parent. I worked the night shift. By the time I got home, I was able to see him go off to school, and then I would crash, and I'd be gone before they'd come back. And that's how it was. And we worked in 7 days a week in the beginning, and then we finally went to 6 days a week, which was, you know, my first day off from work. I ended up at a 9/11 funeral for my wife's cousin who had died from NYFD. And so, you know, I went back and told the guys, my first day off, I'm at a funeral. It's like I can't get away from this. And it was, it just melded together. And we were working around the clock 24/7. And if you missed the shift, it was like missing a week's worth of work by the time you got back, because so much would happen in the other 2 shifts. You know, it was go, go, go. And it was unbelievable. And when I look back at it, like on a day like today, you know, I could transport myself right back to the first day I was down there, and it was anything. But anyway, what I like to talk about is my daughter, 13th, you know, her life changed from it. I seen her direction in life change. I seen that she went into a military school. She became a Navy architect, and she became driven. And before that, she was a girly girl, and I can't say, what made her do it, but a sense of purpose. And my son, he told me that he hated first grade. And I asked him why. He says, "You're never here." And I said, "Well, I'll be here soon enough." So I stayed at the site until the end of April, middle of April. I got hurt, and I left the site pretty banged up and pretty sick. And, I knew it. And, I went back to work September of 2022 when I was healthy enough to go back to work, but I still not feeling good. And I got involved with my union. I got involved with going down to Congress and trying to get some kind of health care benefits for us, some kind of victim compensation fund and all that. I made over 40 trips to Washington, walked the halls, and that was a whole nother thing. And while I was doing all this, I was watching my kids grow up and watching their lives change because of it. And all I can say is, on September 10th, I was a jaded New Yorker. You know what I mean? I was that kind of guy that probably gave that rap throughout America. New Yorkers, you don't want to deal with them. But after September 11th, we all became America for the first time in my life, and proud to be Americans. And the honor and, for me being down there was another 100 people that would have gladly took my spot. They would have traded any day with it. And, the stuff that we had to go through and what we had to do down there, it bonded us. There was like 60 real tight-knit DDCers that were down there. 22 of us are already passed away. And they weren't in pleasant deaths. They were very painful deaths. And some of them way too young. And it's still happening. And all I can say is that when you're called into something, just go in it and try to do the best you can do. You'll never know what opportunities will arise from it. And you're going about your everyday, but there's so many things you could do. And as a young person, I don't want you to forget. And, we witnessed it, we lived it, but you know what? It was pure destruction the 7 months I was down there. And all I can say is that it changed my life. Fast forward 23 years from there, my daughter got married. She has 2 beautiful kids. Her father-in-law, my future father-in-law, he worked down there as a police officer. I didn't know him at the time. We interacted down there, and we laugh about it now, but who knew what the future would hold? And all I can say is that I was here last night. I sat on the plaza over there, and it's so peaceful and so moving, and God bless everybody that made this happen. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And God bless all of you. And when you get home, hug someone you love. And don't worry about the cable bill. And don't worry about the Easy Pass. You don't have to pay Easy Pass out here. But I fight with my son all the time about it and the phone. But you know what? It's not a bad thing to fight about. God bless you all.
like to thank our speakers and the Kewaskum High School Band and Mr. McLeod for making this happen. And now we will have military honors from the American Legion Post 384. Just please know there will be some shots, so so the students are aware that there will be some loud noises.
Attention. Right shoulder arm. Right. Okay. Return to salute again. Ready? Aim. Fire. Aim. Fire. Aim. Fire. Right shoulder arm. Left face. Present arm. Bugler sound tap. Order arm. Guard dismissed.
That concludes our program for today. Thank you all for coming. I invite you to take a walk around the memorial and visit the memorial. If you have any questions or anything, please be sure to see a board member here from the Kewaskum 9/11 Memorial, and we appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay, here we are at Kewaskum, Wisconsin, at the 9/11 Wisconsin Memorial, and I'm with your name.
My name's Gordon Haberman.
Gordon, nice to see you today. What a great event today. Those that I've talked to, you're the one that's responsible getting this together. Let's hear about how this 9/11 Memorial started.
The process started way back in 2010. Kathy and I were making a donation of Andrea's recovered artifacts to the future 9/11 Memorial Museum. That was material recovered from Ground Zero: phone, glasses, purse, and very badly damaged. And we decided the museum would be the best ones to take it. So we were out there for the anniversary of 2010, and we made the donation of the artifacts, and I mentioned to the future curators what happened to all the steel. And all the steel at that time was held out at a hangar at JFK Airport. And on that visit, we my wife, myself, curator from the museum, and a welder from Ground Zero made the trip out to JFK. And during that trip, I learned that they're releasing pieces of steel to memorials across the country. And they had a lot of rules and regulations in order for that to happen. But I went past this piece of steel here, and I thought that would be nice for a memorial here. And I envisioned a very modest memorial. And that started the ball rolling. It took us, after approval, 4 years for us to get it back. I actually drove out to where the steel was with another board member, Jerry Gosa, and we drove the steel back to Kewaskum. And from that point on, we formed a committee, and plans were being generated, and it got bigger and bigger. And wow, how are we going to build this? And the final project cost on this was $1,100,000. But 3/4 of that, actually all of it, was donated money or donated time or donated material from the community of Kewaskum. No tax dollars were used in this. And this is what has grown.
Just amazing. It's just such in detail. Everything was done in fine tuning and everything as
A lot
well.
of symbolism.
A lot of symbolism too as well. For those that don't know, unfortunately, your daughter passed away in the towers. Let's hear about Andrea.
Andrea was one of our two bright lights, her and our daughter, Julie. She worked for a company in Chicago called Car Futures, and she was on the first, out of Chicago, and she was on the first trip of her business career. Flew out to New York, got in about midnight on Monday night, the 10th, and showed up for work at about 8 the next morning on the 11th. Their offices were on the 92nd floor. No one from the 92nd on up lived in the North Tower. And they were all alive, however, until the last phone call from the Trade Center came from an employee of Car Futures. The rest is history.
Well, my condolences to you and your family, but this memorial just honors her and all the victims' families as well.
All the victims.
And, what do you want people to take away from this memorial?
Well, first I would like them to come and see and follow the story of 9/11. Bring their kids who have no idea what 9/11 was about. And I would like them to come away with the tragedy. The attacks of 9/11 were a tragedy for this country. However, what happened starting 9/12 is what defines us as a nation. And it's important to remember. It's also important never to forget.
Well, on that note, Gordon, let me say this is absolutely an excellent memorial. I encourage everyone to come out to Kewaskum to visit this memorial, and thank you so much for a great event today as well.
Thank you.
Okay, here we are in Kewaskum, Wisconsin at the 9/11 Wisconsin Memorial event with a great guest speaker, and your name is?
Ronaldo Vega.
Ronaldo, thank you so much for coming to this event today. It's a very powerful event. Let's hear your story. You were at Ground Zero to...
Yeah, so I work for the New York City Department of Design and Construction. We're the city agency that builds everything New York uses, right? And I'm an architect. And on that crazy, horrible day, I was working at my office in Long Island City, which is about 9 miles away from Ground Zero. And so when first tower got hit, my wife called me and she said, "Hey, do you know a plane went into the towers?" And I didn't think much of it. I thought it was a new pilot, maybe lost control and went into the side of the building. And I said, "Look, keep an eye on it. Call me if you hear anything else." And I went back to work. I'm in a interior space, no windows, a little cubicle, doing paperwork. City of New York, and jobs is all about paperwork. But within the next 10, 20 minutes, we knew we were at war. And so we started going to the front of the building. We started seeing from our outside of our building, we could see the towers on fire. And we had a vantage point to the south, and we saw one tower, the horizontal line of smoke coming out of it, and then saw the plane go into the second one, right? So then we knew we were going to be engaged. We knew that we'd be part of it. We didn't know to what extent, but we're construction, architectural engineering. You know what? They may call us to help with safe off the buildings, maybe bring in netting and protect from falling glass and that kind of stuff. So I got a few calls. I said, hey, you got my unit was a schools unit. It was the summer, school was over, so I kind of had like some free contract work. I can get some contractors to go down. So I started to, mobilize my team to go down there. And of course, my concern was that my daughter was a high school student at that time. Oh my God, it's been so many years, that she was stuck in Manhattan because everything was closed down. It was like a lockdown in a prison. Everything stopped. Nobody in, nobody out of Manhattan. No flights, no phone calls because the towers had all the cell sites. The phones didn't work. So I spent that whole afternoon and such trying to find my daughter, who was in Manhattan. And so I actually walked from my office to the other side of now it's called Ed Koch Bridge, but at that time it was the 59th Street Bridge. And she was on the other side of Manhattan, and they wouldn't let people out unless the parents came get them. And that was just unbelievable, the mindset, right? The protocols and regulations. Finally, they said, no, if your parents call and get through, first of all, we had to get through because there was no phones working. Found a landline, we got through, they let her go, and she walked. So I said, I'll find her on the other side of the 59th Street Bridge, and I'll bring her in. And I just saw all of humanity cross that bridge, covered in the white gypsum board powder and debris, field, dust coming over that bridge. It was like the ghosts coming over. It was thousands and thousands of people, and I never saw my daughter. She walked right past me because there was so much of humanity and the horror on their faces, the tragedy of their faces, and I realized I have to volunteer. So I went back to the office, I volunteered, and I got assigned to the recovery effort, and I was there for 10 months. And after the 10 months, I went back to my city life. My unit was disbanded because there was no more work, no more schools work. Got transferred to another unit to do some libraries. Then within a couple of years, I had an opportunity to work for the 9/11 Memorial. Entry-level job, I jumped at it. I rose up and became the senior director of design for the whole memorial and museum. Helped build a memorial museum, 8 years of my life in that project, and that's where I became forever intertwined with the 9/11 story. During the recovery effort, I met Gordy and Kathy Haberman, and we became really close. They always came to New York for 9/11, and they'd have a dinner after the event, and we'd all, we'd have fellowship, and I'd sing Danny Boy at that dinner, and we became very, very close. And so when this opportunity came, they said, would you come out on 9/11 to Wisconsin? I said, only you could make me come out of New York on 9/11 to be here. And look at this. This is amazing. It's like, the fellowship here, it's, the memorial here is amazing. It's just right. When you have a community that gets together and gets their funds together and everything's built by donation money, it's a different collaboration than in New York City, which was like pulling teeth for 8 years. Here you guys put it together. You know what? It says it all. It does it all. It has all the bells and whistles you need, and it tugs at your heart. It's a magnificent little memorial. And so Mike and I came from New York and we brought a couple of baby survivor trees. And here they are on the plaza here.
Hey, maybe if you could talk a little bit about that. People may not know what the survivor tree was in New York.
Okay, so early on in the recovery effort, basically the Parks Department came around to see if they could salvage any trees from the site. And they came upon this one tree that was so badly burned and mutilated, they listed it on their chart as mortally wounded. So they let it go, right? And yes, it was pretty bad. It had been torn and branches were ripped and it had no semblance. It was horizontal, no semblance of a living tree anymore. But Mike and I are working the job, and all of a sudden, in October, actually October 31st, Halloween Day, this branch pops out of the ground and, metaphorically says, look at me, I want to live. And we said, look at this tree. It's still alive. It's still alive. It's mostly dead, but it's still alive. And so we made all our calls. We knew connections. We had connections with other city agencies, and we begged the Parks Department to take it. I said, look, just put it in the corner somewhere. Give it a chance, It's the last living thing to come out of 9/11. The last living thing to come out of this site. Come on, we got to do something. Sure enough, they took it up there, and it survived. And I went through a troublesome time up there. I was mortally wounded, so they had to, the very branch that signaled its life had to be pruned off because it might invite infection. So they pruned it, kept it clean. The following year, it started regrowing.
And so when I saw it again in 2007 as a director of design, I mean, she was still pretty damn ugly, but I fell in love with her. I said, we got to bring her home. So I went through a whole years and years of paperwork and keeping on top of her, and I had to find a way to get someone to donate the money and the time to not only nurture it, but maybe protect it and get it to come back. And so 2010 in March, might have been early March, I was in Italy picking the stone for the memorial, the granite that's on the plaza. And I get a call that a nor'easter came through New York and knocked it down, uprooted the tree. After it had worked so hard since 2001 to 2007 to survive, here we are 2010, a nor'easter comes over and knocks the tree over. And it uproots it. More than half its root system is torn apart. It's hanging on by literally half its root system. I get on a plane back from Italy and I said, that's it, guys. I got to take it out of this Parks Department location. You really, you did all you could for her, but you don't know how to protect it. You don't know how to take it. You don't have the funding. Let's get it and bring it to my site where all my other trees are, where they're, basically couch potatoes are taken care of. They have their own irrigation, fertilization. They have their own computer chip. It knows when it drops a leaf. It knows everything, right? So I made the plan to take it out there. And then when we finally got the team to start the giant spade come in to pull it out, Tom Cox, and he's the Texas company that we used to move the trees, Environmental Tree, came to me and said, Ron, I'll do whatever you say, but if you move that tree's going to die. I said, Tom, really? I got to leave it there. They're not going to take care of it. Tom said to me, don't worry. We'll do what needs to be done, and we'll come and take care of it here. I said, okay, on that promise, I'll leave it here. So basically stood it up, replanted it, put moisture, mulch, tied it down, guided it so they couldn't fall again. And as a good circumstance, it had been placed against a fence, and some tall oak trees were behind it. So the tall oak trees were blocking the sun from hitting one side of it, so it wasn't growing evenly. There was kind of a bald side. Well, that nor'easter knocked those trees down. So by leaving it there, it finally got the sun it needed on that side. But he told me, Ron, if it doesn't fully flower in April, that means it's not going to come back. Or if it's going to be a slow death, and you're not going to want to bring a half-dying tree to the memorial. I say, I know, you're right. So we waited, we watched, and in April, fully budded out on every corner of it. White blossoms. She survived, she was healthy, she fully regrew and regenerated all her roots, and we brought her back and planted her on the plaza. So that's our survivor tree. And the seedlings from that tree, two of them are here.
Okay, here we are in Kewaskum, Wisconsin at the 9/11 Memorial Event, and I'm with your name.
Michael Kenny.
Mike, thank you so much for coming out to this event today, but we'd like to hear your story. What's your connection with 9/11?
Well, I worked for the City of New York, Department of Design and Construction, and, on 9/11, you would never think that we would be involved in something like that, but because the fire department was doing a rescue operation for the first 30 days, DDC was made the lead agency after the 30 days. But we responded to the site the day of September 11th, and the first day I went down there was the Saturday into Sunday, September 15th, 16th.
Also heard about there a lot of dust and particles throughout the week.
Yeah, for the first 4 months, the fires were still raging in the pit, and you still had that going. You had a lot of environmental concerns. You had mercury from the light bulbs. You had asbestos that was known in the building. You had freon in the chillers. So you had a lot of this stuff that we had to work around, and we were aware of it, and we would map out areas that we were going into and safe zones and stuff like that.
So how long did the cleanup take? Because I remember for a while it was...
The last column was taken out at the end of May, and then wrapping up with paperwork and everything. It was July that DDC turned the site back over to the Port Authority. So it was a 10-month project, complete from start to finish, which was remarkable, with billions and billions of tonnage taken out daily.
We thank you coming down to the memorial, and you got to see it. Let's hear, but what did you think of the memorial here in Kewaskum?
I think it's very peaceful. It's very moving, and it has so much life around it, you know, with the flowers and the trees growing and stuff. It's gorgeous. It's, you know, I sat here last night for an hour and I was very, very moved by how much it has grown in the last 4 years and coming alive. And it will change. Every year it will change as the trees get bigger and, you know, it grows.
Now there's a memorial there as well on the Ground Zero site. Let's hear about that.
Okay, the memorial on the ground site, there's 2 reflecting pools that are the footprint of the original towers. And then there's a sub-basement museum, which is 4 stories into the ground. And that's a very moving place, too, to go visit. And we also have the plaza. We have trees. We have all the names are engraved on the pools. As you walk around, you could find that name of a loved one or someone that you're doing. And it's it took a long time. They went into construction, you know, and they built a beautiful, beautiful plaza down there.
And one last question. What do you feel people should take away from 9/11?
How fragile life is, that, you know, we're not promised tomorrow. Try to make the best of today. And, you know, we kind of put all these other things in front of our lives that really don't matter nothing. You know, we got to get back to basics. We don't need to be killing each other like we've been doing for the last 23 years.
Well, Michael, we thank you so much for coming and sharing your story here in Kewaskum, and thank you so much for telling us today.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.